You cannot threaten me for leaving an association when the law allows withdrawal, yet you stand here acting like I committed a crime today.
You signed documents, you owe loyalty, and abandoning the HOA violates community order whether you like it or not.
I filed proper notice, cleared every fee, and followed California code exactly, but you still came screaming into my driveway.
Rules are rules, and people like you think paperwork makes you untouchable, but authority decides who stays and who pays.
Authority does not invent power, it obeys law, and your threats prove you never cared about legality or fairness.
I am calling the police right now, because compliance matters more than your personal grief or excuses.
You can call anyone you want, but lies collapse the moment they meet truth and evidence.
Officers will remove you, force compliance, and remind you who controls this neighborhood.
Control built on intimidation always ends the same way, with exposure and consequences.
Then stand there and watch as the system you trust turns against you tonight.
Grayson Mitchell had once believed quiet neighborhoods were sanctuaries built to protect ordinary lives. After decades as a union electrician, retirement promised peace, reflection, and healing after loss. That belief shattered slowly, not through violence, but through relentless pressure disguised as community order. The Homeowners Association in Willowbrook Estates marketed itself as stability, but under new leadership, it became a weapon. Grayson was grieving, recently widowed, and living alone in a house heavy with memory. That vulnerability made him visible to someone who thrived on control. The new HOA president identified weakness the way predators sense blood in water. Grayson's independence and quiet refusal to be dominated marked him as a problem to be corrected. Withdrawal from the HOA was legal, documented, and precise. Grayson studied the law, filed notices, and cleared obligations. The response was immediate retaliation. Invented fees appeared without votes or filings. Threatening letters arrived by certified mail. Each notice escalated in tone, designed to exhaust and frighten. What could have remained an administrative disagreement transformed into psychological warfare. Grayson recognized the pattern not as chaos, but as strategy. Intimidation relied on fear, not legality. That realization changed his approach from defensive to investigative. County offices became his refuge. Records told a story leadership hoped no one would read. Amendments were missing. Votes never occurred. Emergency assessments existed only on paper signed by one authority. Evidence revealed a structure built on shortcuts and silence. Grayson was not alone. Other residents had suffered quietly, believing resistance was useless. An elderly neighbor had documented years of irregularities with meticulous care, waiting for someone willing to act. Together, they connected incidents into a coherent narrative of abuse. Retaliation intensified when resistance appeared organized. A classic truck vanished from Grayson's driveway under the label of abandonment. Towing fees followed. The removal was not about appearance but punishment. Recovery proved the vehicle was legal, insured, and functional. That act crossed an emotional line. It was no longer administrative cruelty, but personal violation. Each step of harassment generated evidence, and each reaction by leadership exposed desperation. Surveillance became protection. Cameras documented trespass, false complaints, and coordinated rumor campaigns. Authority was no longer hidden behind letters, but visible through repeated misconduct. Municipal inspectors noted patterns of false reporting. Official warnings accumulated. The machinery of intimidation was colliding with documented reality. What leadership viewed as escalation was actually exposure. Every threat, every complaint, every fabricated charge added weight to a growing case. Grayson understood something fundamental then. Abuse survives in silence, but collapses under light. The story was no longer about leaving an association. It was about revealing a system that thrived by convincing people they were powerless. When intimidation failed, character destruction became the next tactic. False narratives spread through neighbors, municipal offices, and emergency services. Reports described instability, threats, and danger, none supported by evidence. Each accusation carried serious implications, designed to isolate Grayson socially and legally. The strategy was calculated to shift focus away from financial irregularities and onto manufactured fear. but repeated false reports triggered scrutiny. Authorities noticed frequency, similarity, and lack of verification. Patterns emerged that could not be ignored. Legal escalation backfired spectacularly. Sworn statements contained contradictions directly refuted by recordings and witnesses. Surveillance footage captured entire encounters disproving allegations. Audio evidence preserved exact language twisted later into threats. The system designed to intimidate instead preserved truth. Professional legal review reframed harassment as criminal behavior. False reporting, perjury, and abuse of emergency services transformed a civil conflict into a prosecutable case. Meanwhile, financial examination revealed the core motive. Community funds had been siphoned into private accounts through fabricated services and self-approved invoices. The amounts were not trivial. They represented years of trust stolen from families who believed dues protected their homes. Each fraudulent transaction aligned with periods of heightened intimidation. Harassment was not random cruelty, but cover. Anyone questioning authority threatened exposure of theft. Control maintained silence while money disappeared. Community response shifted from fear to unity. Neighbors shared experiences once believed isolated. Stories aligned. Documentation surfaced. Financial statements contradicted reality. The illusion of absolute control fractured as collective awareness spread. Transparency replaced secrecy. Evidence moved from private garages to professional prosecutors. What had been dismissed as petty HOA conflict was now recognized as organized fraud with multiple criminal dimensions. Attempts to sabotage accountability grew frantic. Forged communications, manipulated media narratives, and last-minute intimidation failed under verification. Digital forensics traced lies to their source. Each desperate maneuver added charges rather than relief. The system that had once shielded misconduct now accelerated consequences. Investigators prepared formal filings. Warrants followed evidence, not emotion. The imbalance of power reversed completely. Grayson observed the transformation with clarity rather than vengeance. Justice was no longer abstract. It was procedural, documented, and inevitable. Abuse of authority depends on the belief that consequences will never arrive. The moment that belief collapses, so does control. What began as a quiet homeowner seeking peace had become a catalyst exposing systemic exploitation. The story expanded beyond one neighborhood into a cautionary record of how unchecked authority consumes itself. The end was approaching, not through confrontation, but through the slow certainty of law. The collapse came publicly, decisively, and without mercy. An emergency community meeting convened under scrutiny. Evidence replaced rhetoric. Financial records displayed patterns impossible to deny. Witnesses confirmed harassment timelines. Independent authorities observed proceedings as documentation spoke louder than accusation. Attempts to regain narrative control failed under the weight of verified truth. Authority built on fear cannot survive transparency. Arrest followed evidence, not spectacle. Charges reflected accumulated misconduct, not a single act. Embezzlement, fraud, perjury, and false reporting formed a chain unbroken by denial. The moment symbolized accountability, not revenge. For the community, it marked release from prolonged psychological pressure. For the individual exposed, it marked the end of manufactured power. Restitution followed conviction. Funds returned to those taken from. Oversight structures replaced secrecy. Independent audits ensured repetition was impossible. Leadership changed, not through intimidation, but consensus. Rules returned to their intended purpose, protection rather than punishment. Dues decreased. Trust slowly rebuilt. Fear dissipated as transparency became routine. Grayson's decision to remain in the community surprised many. Leaving would have been understandable, but rebuilding mattered more. The experience forged connections stronger than contracts. Neighbors became allies. Silence gave way to vigilance. A memorial scholarship honored loss, transformed into purpose, ensuring that suffering generated future protection for others. The broader impact extended beyond one neighborhood. Investigations triggered reviews elsewhere. Similar patterns surfaced. Accountability multiplied. One case exposed many. The lesson was clear and transferable. Authority without oversight invites abuse. Documentation is power. Collective action dismantles intimidation. Justice does not require aggression, only persistence. In the quiet after resolution, peace returned not as absence of conflict, but as presence of fairness. The neighborhood no longer whispered. Children played freely. Gardens grew without measurement. Ordinary life resumed, fortified by experience. Grayson understood then that grief had not weakened him. It had clarified what mattered. Standing against abuse restored purpose once lost. The story closed not with triumph, but with balance. Wrongdoing met consequence. Community reclaimed agency. Silence was broken permanently, and a quiet neighborhood became something stronger than it had ever been before.